Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And I'm sorry I ruined it in a way, but anyway, hello. So I'm Mark Miodownik. I'm a material scientist into stuff. And what I want to try and do is kind of get you to see stuff differently, like as a result of this talk after today. And I'm hoping that I will achieve that. So how to kind of get you into this topic? Well, I usually just start with a picture of a street in London outside my old lab, where I used to wait for the bus stop. And in case you're wondering what scientists do when they're waiting for buses, in my case, just kind of pick out the materials and wait for the bus, and wait for the bus. And London being what it is, actually it doesn't matter. There's so many materials. Like you can wait for a long time, but I'll never run out of materials, which is a nice game to have. And it always amazes me and reassures me, because that thing in your life where you think, why am I doing what I do? Like, can I just recall again why I'm here? And I actually never tire of this subject, because it's just everything. It's about everything, like the ceiling, the foam you're sitting on, the clothes you're wearing. It's everything. Stuff is everything, right? You take it all away, and we're naked, we're shivering. We're not really human, actually. Like a lot of this material is actually what is who we are. It's a reflection of who we are. It's a reflection of our desires, our hopes, our dreams. And we express it via materials. We create new materials to achieve impossible dreams, or just actually solve toothache, which is also really important, because if you don't solve toothache, you're in real pain for days, weeks. And actually in the old days, I mean, until relatively recently, you just had to, your teeth were yanked out with pliers. Every time we've had a problem, like I'm worried about storms and I want to protect myself, we invent materials like concrete, or I want to get my water from here, from the well to the whole city, and I want to do it robustly. We invent lead pipes, and then PVC pipes, and so on. So it's just a brilliant topic, and there is no end to the ingeniousness of humans. So how did we get there? Why did we so obsessed with them, and what are we doing? Well, and just give you a quick sweep of history, basically. We start in the past, ancient times, where I know that we talk about the beginning of humans essentially being in the Stone Age, probably actually before stones, tools, and flints. Wood was because we know this, the great apes and monkeys already use wood as tools to get ants and things. So, and they're very skilled at it. So there's no reason to think that our branch of that, which turned into humans, wasn't already very skilled at using wood. But in the Stone Age is really important, because actually if you want to cut wood and make elaborate structures and make tools, and then if you want to make fire, you really have to understand stones. And then once you have fire, you can start looking at how fire affects materials like stone. And then there's this enormous leap forward where some of our ancestors realized if you put certain types of stone in a hot fire under the right conditions, you got metals. So you turned a stone into copper in the first instance. And there aren't many metals lying on the surface of the planet, almost zero. And the ones that are here are either gold or silver, which are very hard to come by and not great tool materials, but beautiful and wonderful anyway, and were highly prized. But most of the useful stuff that came from meteors is iron and stuff. It rusts. So actually being able to produce on demand a very useful metal like copper, and then soon after that, understanding that you could alloy it with other ones and make bronze, and then after that, understand how you can make steel. So this is why the ages of civilization are named after materials, because each time we invent a new material, it changes everything. You suddenly can make different architecture, you can make the pyramids, you can make roads, you can make agriculture and tools, and you can have a whole different way of organizing ourselves. You can store things like oils over the whole winter, and grains away from rice, rats and mice, which is a game changer. Basically, if you can't do that, you're going to die. You can make clothes. So, we as we march forward in time, we invent materials to solve problems, and we're very problem solving. But then we start to go, hey, we're having a great time on this planet. let's kind of do something really wacky and mad. Like, let's actually try to, create implants in the body so we can mend bones, and we can replace hips, we can correct eyesight with glasses, right? So you're no longer blind forever if your eyes go wrong. Actually, we just learned how to make glass and grind it and actually correct it. How many of us would be absolutely clueless without that? And then while we're on glass, look, think about what would happen if that window didn't exist. Because window, the root of the word is wind hole. It would be very windy, and it was. Most early windows were just very blowy, and they had curtains over them. So inventing a transparent material that is also rigid is an incredibly step forward. It brings the light in, but not the heat, not the wind. So at each stage, we do something just marvelous and great and advances human condition. And where are we going? And that's the question I want to ask in this talk. Where is the future of materials? We've worked out how to make solar cells, so we can now harvest energy from the sun, but we're also making sort of living materials and self-repairing materials. So that's what I want to talk about. But before I do that, just going to take you through a little bit of just how amazing some materials are, because it just never ceases to amuse me. And this is I might need a bit of sound on this. Find out how strong this ball really is. Could it withstand this industrial roller, or this industrial roller, or this industrial roller, or this 20-ton industrial roller? Let's see, shall we? How strong? Just to show how effective this roller is, first let's try a cricket ball. Also, a good part of my job is I get to... yeah. No longer a ball, or a puck now. Now the tungsten carbide ball. This guy didn't reckon it. The wood's destroyed, the ball totally unscathed. That's amazing, absolutely unscathed. Wait, okay, look, that's what's happened. It's made a massive hole in the concrete. There's not a scratch on it. It's absolutely, completely pristine. So just the ability to do that, that's what we've managed to do. Make these things sort of super properties like incredible strength or incredible opacity or incredible transparency. And so that's, how do you do that? Like, I wanted to give you a bit of an insight into how material scientists actually design a material like that, which seems to have just impossible properties. It can withstand a 20-ton roller and not even get a scratch on. And I would say that it's very, very, very hard for anyone to scratch that material. It's so impossibly strong. So I want to introduce you to how materials work, and it's all about scale. So this is a map of the world of this room, the world of the outside, but it's slightly different from normal maps in that it has big stuff at the top, and then smaller down here. And there's two sides to this. One is the living world, the living materials, and the other is the man-made materials. And I'm going to just take you through this. First on the living side, because it kind of is much more familiar. So you have big stuff like trees, and then you zoom in, you have smaller stuff like whales, and then mice, and then the fleas on the mice, then hairs on the fleas. We're zooming in. And then if you look into a bit of hair, you find it's made of many cells. It's a tissue, really. And in fact, that's true of everything about us, like all kind of multicellular creatures like us. So we have skin, which is made of different cells. We have brains, we have different cells. Your lips, your teeth are made of different cells. And each one of the combination of cells gives those materials their materials properties. So there's the softness, or there's the hardness, or there's the strength. And so that's what the body has done. That's what nature does. It kind of makes things like strong lignin and cellulose to build a tree 100 meters tall, or it will build something like a cheek, like for us to laugh, and or neurons to think. And so this is a sort of magic, and they're all made out of cells. So that's the Lego of the living world. Everything is made out of cells, and they all start from one cell. So one cell, which is just like a bit of squidgy jelly, really, right? Tiny bit of squidgy jelly, can actually, with its molecular mechanisms inside it, turn into something as hard as enamel, or as hard as bone, or it can turn into something as soft as skin, or as spiky as hair. Now that's a piece of magic, right? How does it work? Well, when we look inside cells, we find it's full of complexity of macromolecules, all swimming around in this jelly, right, which is the inside of the cell. And they're all doing stuff. They're all making things happen, secreting different elements on the edge or going through. And if you were to give an analogy for what a cell looks like, how you could comprehend the complexity, it's like a city, like London. Each cell has transport links through it, has energy generation, has waste generation. And of course, just like London, no one is telling everyone what to do. Everyone is kind of autonomous. So how can a cell turn into, a tissue and just know what it's doing? Like, who is telling it what to do? Well, as far as we know, there is nothing. So if you zoom into the middle, you find DNA, sure enough, and this DNA is code for each individual molecule, like a protein or a carbohydrate. But that's not an instruction of what to do when you get to a traffic light, or what to do when you get to the edge of a city, right? It's not telling them what to do. They are just doing it. They're just self-organizing. And so if you ask the question, what makes stuff alive, like what makes us alive, where is life here, it's impossible to answer. We don't really know. One thing we do know is that there's information traveling between the scales, that DNA is creating molecules. Molecules are interacting with each other and somehow self-organizing into cells. Those cells are then creating tissues, that they are then creating bodies that live for a long time and have all sorts of different properties and all sorts of different behaviors and interact with the environment. But the other thing is also true, we know, which is that what happens in the environment, the big scale, affects the small scales. So information travels down through the organism, through the cell tissues, through the cells, into the molecules, through into the genes, and different genes are switched on depending on your environment. So there's a flow of information going up and down. You can sort of think of yourself as a multi-scale being that is constantly, information is flowing between the scales. And one of the things that information is doing, a crucial thing that I want to talk about today, is that it's making sure that the scale above it is intact. Is it damaged? Does it need to grow? Does it need to die in order to protect the whole organism? Is there a cancer? Do I need to attack it? So basically, there are different scales, and each one is doing a different thing in terms of that activity. But it's happening all scales. This self-repair, and pretty much, if you wonder why you sleep and why if you don't get sleep you die, it's because you need to self-repair all the time. 40% of your metabolism is just recovering from defects, and not just the scratches on your skin that you might get going through a gorse bush, although that's amazing, right? That we self-repair, but actually just the internal molecular mechanism of all your cells. And so this constant self-repair and this constant looking after itself, when that stops working, you die. That's the thing. So in a sense that what is not alive, when you're not alive, is when that's not working. Okay, now what about this side, the stuff that we make, this screen or this chair or this glass? You might think there's nothing in there but atoms because it's transparent, clearly there's nothing. But actually there are all these scales in there, and they have all been designed for particular properties, one transparency, another for strength, another for hardness. And so how do we do that as humans? Well, we have got this ability to kind of make big stuffs like bridges or cars or smartphones, but inside every one of those is a whole set of different scales of structure that we have designed and created. So we've got transistors down here. There's 1 trillion of those in a piece of silicon as big as your thumbnail, and that is what allows your smartphone to talk to the world and understand. But there's also a very thin layer of indium tin oxide on the surface, and that is one of the few transparent conductors, and it knows you've touched it because there's an electric charge, and that electric charge is then communicated all the way through to transistors, which make a decision about which bit of the screen you touched, and then instructs something else to happen, and then you see the screen change for whatever you've done. And that computation happens down here, where you see it up here. So we have created things where there's information flowing going up through the scales, and we can make amazingly strong bridges and amazingly fast cars and materials that know you've touched them. So we've done quite a lot of the work that biology and nature has done over billions of years. But what we haven't done is we haven't really worked out how to get self-healing to work. So basically most of our stuff, it's a marvelous, amazing, but when it breaks, it's done, and you have to build another one. And so bridges, houses, we see it, the infrastructure, the railways. Why are there constant engineering works? It's constantly falling apart, and we have to constantly repair it, which means you have to stop the trains happening. And it's usually on Sundays when I'm coming home, and that's annoying. Okay, so I've set the scene, how we do it, these amazing materials. There's another thing we've got a problem with, which is that we're so good at making stuff that people want that we make it very cheap. It's incredibly good. So we've made these headphones in any station you can buy. You go to the station and you've forgotten your headphones and you think, I can't listen to my podcast. Oh God, I'm going to be so bored. No problem, $12.99 for an incredible piece of kit that if you went back even 40, 50 years, people would just have been amazed at. Bluetooth, wireless headphone, what are you talking about? That's magic. No, totally, easy. Sometimes cheaper than a drink. It's actually more expensive to buy a drink at a station than it is to buy a pair of headphones that are absolutely brilliant. So they're disposable. They're so good, you don't have to think about whether you've brought your ones with you or not. You can just buy it on the fly. And that's true of pretty much all of the stuff in our lives. And that's then kind of has another output, which is that where we're throwing it in, we haven't really given much thought to. And a lot of it's ending up downhill from everywhere else. And if you go downhill from everywhere else, you end up in the sea. So it goes from the land into rivers and rivers into the sea, and then it all collects. And these are only the ones, or these are just packaging, because you can see them. But everything else is sunk to the bottom. And there's much more down there. So we've got to, on the one hand, we should be so pleased with ourselves, right? We can make all these things. And on the other hand, we really aren't as clever as we think, and we're basically trashing the planet. And it's not just materials and manufacturing that has done this. It's a way in which we run our economy. And you have to kind of remember that that is part of the issue here. So I'll just kind of, in case you don't know how consumerism works, the reason why consumerism had got us so wealthy is because we have mastered mass manufacturing. So we dig stuff out of the ground, we mass manufacture into all those different scales. So we have tiny silicon chips and tiny microphones and tiny this, that, and the other, and we can get all amazing properties. And then we sell it to everyone, and you get it, you love it, and then you throw it away. And well, essentially, it doesn't really. Pretty much 99% of everything we make is not recyclable. So this is the problem. We've got so vastly wealthy, so good at this, but it's a linear economy. It just goes one way. And that's responsible for 40% of CO2 emissions and vast pollution. So when people say, oh, this country is only responsible for 1% of the CO2 emissions, so what does it matter what we do, whether we kind of decarbonize or not? It makes no difference. It's not. We are buying, this stuff is all made in other countries. We are fueling the CO2 emissions of all the other countries too. And the wealthier countries, the top 10 wealthiest people, percent of the population are responsible for a vast amount of the CO2 emissions. So it's not about just where you are and how, if you've got an electric car. But the global GDP is huge and people want it to grow. But if they grow it this way, we'll just destroy ourselves and nature. So we've got to think of a different way of doing this. And usually people then say, well, let's have something called the circular economy. So what happens is we stop digging things out of the ground. We carry on manufacturing amazing stuff. We carry on selling it to people. We're carrying on enjoying it and inventing new stuff. But instead of throwing it out, it goes into a repair cycle. So either manually repair or, as I'll tell you in a minute, it self-repairs like the body. That would be a much smarter way of doing it. Or at the end of that life, like us, it's ultimately recycled back into new stuff. So we no longer are digging up mountains and we're no longer trashing the seas and the land. So this is the perfect place for us to be in the next 20 years. This would solve potentially a lot of problems. So how do we get there? Well, in theory, we can take a leaf out of nature's book. So nature, actually builds things out of a few numbers of elements. So carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. So it hasn't got a big palette. And actually, most of the organisms all eat each other. So there's a whole set of bacteria and fungi that basically will consume bigger stuff when it dies and recycle it back in, and then we live off those. So it's inbuilt recycling because it evolved to recycle everything. It's inbuilt self-production because that's just the magic of nature and life, and we still don't know how that works, as I said before. But the reason why things last at all long is that all of them, including the cells, have self-repair mechanisms inbuilt from the start. So, could we do it? Can we make a phone do that? Can we make a car do that? Can we please make the railways do that? Well, we've done this very well. We've really aced this mass production. And probably we're not going to make stuff make itself yet, although it's not obviously not impossible if nature does it. We've almost spent almost zero effort on recycling, like just tiny amounts of thought. We can do paper, cardboard, we can do steel, but we really can't do the rest. And the reason why the rest is so difficult and why we've kind of avoided the issue is that we use almost half the periodic table in our products. So we have vastly more complex set of structures than nature in terms of its chemical composition. And when you try and recycle something that's got, let's say, 20 elements, and you want to get them back out again, you're really fighting against entropy and enthalpy. You really have to put a lot of energy in and a lot of effort in to systematically get stuff out again. And that costs you a lot of time and money. And of course, it's actually cheaper to dig stuff out of a mountain and make a whole linear economy than it is to do this at the moment. So that's why recycling doesn't happen. Like even the batteries of you would have thought that'd be really easy, but actually it's not. There's so many elements in there, and so finding an economic way of doing it that will compete is still eluding us. But repair, hold on a minute, we can do repair now. So what's the state of play on repair? Well, funnily enough, this is where the economics really kicks in, and that's why you have to, and sorry about this diagram, I know it's not, but let me talk you through this. Okay, I can see some frowns. Okay, so this is the normalized cost price, so don't worry about, it's not 100 quid, it's just like that, it's 100% of whatever cost it was so 100% when it was, 2014. So product CPI, what does that mean? Well, in this case, it's washing machine. So look at this. The price of a washing machine was much more expensive than repair. Okay? Then what happens is between 1990 or mid-90s all the way down to the early 2000s, the price of a washing machine goes down and down and down. It actually is opposed. This is inflation, this black line. So it's actually, they're getting cheaper in real terms over 20 years. This is like it's an incredible thing. More people get washing machines. Everyone gets clean clothes. We all smell better. We all look better. What's not to love? Fantastic news. There's no downsides. This is globalization, by the way. This is all driven by globalization. Long, big globe. So in the process, all washing machine companies in this country closed down. They all went abroad. All distributors went abroad. All manufacturer of steel for that went abroad. So basically nothing about the washing machine was ever built here by the end of this process, but it got much cheaper for us as customers, right? But guess what? It starts to get as cheap as repair. So now you're faced with this dilemma, and that's basically tracked since then with inflation. Now you have this dilemma, which is that half the time when a washing machine goes wrong, it's cheaper to buy a new one than it is to get it repaired. A whole machine, a whole wonderful machine with complex microprocessors and a stainless steel drum that rotates at 1,400 revs per minute, which I like, it gets it very dry. All of that, the pump, the motor, everything, all, you can just trash it and get a new one, and it will be delivered the next day. That's how good globalization happened. But the repairers all lose their jobs, unfortunately, and we're seeing that, right? But not just that, but repair becomes this luxury. Like if you're rich, you repair, but if you're poorer, you have to buy new. And this is true of headphones, it's true of laptops, it's true of clothes. So pretty much everything's done this, right? Which is just a crazy world to be in a way. So manual repair has sort of kind of disappeared from the high street and from our lives. And there'll be many people here who've never had anything repaired. Whereas I grew up in a world where even when your radio broke, a person came to repair it. Yes, it's true. It was worth it. Anyway, so if I got this slider here between disposable and repairable, we used to have reusable vapes, but then disposable vapes came in and they just blew them out of the worker. We used to have repairable appliances like hairdryers. Yeah, they used to be repaired, everyone. Now, if it breaks, you throw it away. You used to have repaired clothes, but now you use them and they throw them away. It's economically, it makes total sense. And to everyone in this room, rationally, you should do this. You should do this for two reasons. One is it's cheaper for you So, that's just the rational home economics. 2, it's better for the economy. It drives the linear economy, and everyone's obsessed with growth, so you better start buying some more stuff. Ditto, the phones are almost now disposable. And as I said before, the washing machine is pretty much disposable now. There's a washing machine come on the market now, it's £150. So one fault. Probably just you didn't even change the filter, and it's out the door. You'll have a new one next day. So it's like this crazy world. But anyway, manual repair is a tricky one to move if we're going to do circularity and we're going to address sustainability problems. But by the way, we are getting rid of 24 kilograms of waste, electronic waste per person per year in this country. So we're throwing the washing machines and the radios and the headphones and the hairdryers at a rate of that, which is about 10 of your products per year. You're just throwing it out the way. And it's rational for you to do that. But let me tell you, that stuff does not get recycled. So we wrote this report at the Royal Society a few years ago now, 2021, where we were like, it doesn't have to be this way. And we should take a leaf out of the book of nature and start to make these things self-repair. Because cheap goods is good. We want cheap goods, but we also want to address the sustainability issue. So what we've done is talk about this material called, a new type of material called animate materials. And animate materials are a bit like life. So they are kind of they have the ability to know they're damaged. So most things like this table, this laptop doesn't know it's damaged. But these animate materials would know they're damaged. You have a plastic that knows it's cracked, or a bridge that knows it's cracked. Then they have to be able to kind of, so that means they have to sense it. Then they have to be able to do something about it. They have to be able to repair the crack. And then the last thing they need to be able to do is they have to be able to make a decision to do that. When will they do it and how will they do it? So they have to have these 3 characteristics. And so that's what we're defining as animate materials. They don't make themselves, they're not living, but they are lifelike, and that's hence the animate. Now, can we do it? Answer, yes. We've been working on this, and me and thousands of other scientists around the world have been working on this. We can now embed, and you're familiar now with this diagram, right? So you're, like material science, like that here's a road, it's made of stones and tar. You get these potholes all the time, it turns out. Why is that? Because you get tiny cracks in them, and they grow over time, and then they eject the stones. Can we stop that? Yes, we can, because we can. The tar that's holding together is actually a liquid. Doesn't seem like one, but it is. And if we put these nanoparticles in there, we can get the liquid to flow on demand. So we can repair these cracks by just driving a vehicle over them with a special electromagnet, which will then fluidize the tar and repair the crack. And if you do that over a whole city, constantly, every night or every week, these cracks never grow into a pothole. So you repair the road and you stop the runaway damage of a pothole. And this is not the only way to do it. There's other people doing it. And I had a very interesting conversation with Milton Keynes last year about trying to trial this. So this is not science fiction. In fact, if you think about it, it has to happen. Like, we can't live at this standard of living and not trash the planet without doing something like this, quite radical, but taking us to the next sort of consciousness of humans. Nappies, I know, probably you don't want to think about this now, but here's a lovely nappy, important products, essential products, incredible material science. So this is a super absorbent polymer inside the nappy that has really changed the game on nappies. If you're wondering why they're so good, so grandparents in the room, if you're wondering why the modern ones are so good, it's this. It absorbs 300 times its weight in water. So you pee into it, within 1 second it's a gel. It won't move, it doesn't leak. There's a membrane that stops it making the baby's bottom wet so it doesn't get a rash. Win. Everyone loves this, right? Except 300,000 per minute going into the environment now. Because they're so good and they're such safe. So what we're doing is putting enzymes into these nappies, right? And trying to understand, so when these enzymes are plastic-eating enzymes, so they'll degrade a plastic into less harmful and, in fact, useful molecules. And the question is, when do you want this to happen? Well, you obviously don't want this to happen when it's in the shop, and you don't want it to happen when you're storing it at home. You want it to happen, you don't really want it to happen when the baby's wearing it either, because the whole nappy will fall apart. You want it to happen, and you don't want it to happen in nature, right? Because if it happens in nature, it's very uncontrolled environment. You really have no control of what's going to happen to these chemicals. And anyway they're useful, you want to get them back into the system and make new nappies. So you want this to happen when you've collected them into a recycling situation. And what would that look like? It would look like a brewery. A stainless steel tank with all the nappies in. We would extract the nutrients, the nitrogen and the phosphorus, which would be very useful for fertilizer. These enzymes start to become initiated at a certain temperature, so we get it up to that temperature. The plastics fall apart, we collect them, the molecules that we want, and then we distribute those to the manufacturers, and they make normal nappies. And the whole thing's in a stainless steel, the whole thing's under controlled environment, controlled temperature. We're not looking at a system where we're just asking nature to clean up after us, which I think is a really important point. I've probably gone on too long, haven't I? Anyway. Oh no, I've finished. Hooray! Okay, so basically that's the direction of travel. That we've started this incredible journey together. Well, our ancestors did, getting the tools to work, making the metals out of rocks, making this quality of life that we recognise as the one that we thrive in. But we still got lots to do. We have to sort of solve the environmental problem, and that means that we're going to have to invent, I think, these materials. And we're not going to be consumers anymore. We're going to change our role. Because if things look after themselves, and if we can not throw things into nature and recycle them at the end of their life after they've looked after themselves and repaired themselves, we're going to be regenerators. We're not people who are consuming the planet anymore. We're going to be regenerating the planet. And that, I hope, I hope that you'll join in, really, into this kind of new era of materials discovery and use. So, yeah, we will have a kind of an economy that looks circular, hopefully, where we have animate self-repair happening here. We have advanced biotech and recycling, as I just described here. We have minimum waste, and there will always be some mining, but it will be minimized. And you'll live in a world that's not so different from that, and you'll still have to count materials when you're waiting for the bus, because they'll still be late, because some things probably will never change. But you'll then be able to spot, look, the programmable plastic and the self-cleaning glass, the self-healing paint. By the way, self-healing paint already exists, and it's coming to an automobile near you soon. Anyway, thank you very much. I'll skip the conclusions and just say I hope that I've managed to make you see things differently.
We do have some time for a few questions if anyone has some as well.
So that video on the tungsten carbide sphere,
good.
Where can I access the full video?
Yes, that one is out of a BBC TV program I did about amazing elements, and it's on YouTube under the BBC thing, and it's now the name escapes me, but if you just search my name and tungsten carbide, it'll come up. So yeah, and you should do it. And I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me today, because often I bring it with me, the very ball, so that everyone can really see that not only has it had a 20-ton roller over it, but it's had lots of school kids trying to hammer it with hammers and go at it with their teeth and their nails, and it's still completely pristine.
Wow.
What would you use the tungsten carbide for?
That's the next logical question. Why does it exist? Well, I mean, A, it's just an amazing thing. But B, tungsten is like a strategic element. It's quite a rare element. In fact, we're sort of having to sort of stockpile it now because of the global supply chain issues. But it's very hard, as you saw. So if you want to make other things like machines, you often have to cut them with tools and mill them. And what are those tools made of? Well, they're made of tungsten carbide. So if you basically, in terms of kind of digging things and breaking things up and mining and all those sort of things, it's one of the main materials. But also for making anything out of metal, it's used. And if you go to you'll see it in the shops, tungsten carbide coated tools sometimes, which are sold. They're more expensive, but as you can see, it's an amazing material. That particular ball came from a miner. I went to their exhibition, and we were showing our materials, and he went, "Here, come over here. And he gave me this ball and he said, throw it at that concrete wall. And I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, go on. Anyway, I threw it at the concrete wall. And he ran off. But sure enough, it was pristine. And he let me let me keep it. And it's a valve seat. So when you mine for oil, in fact, very deep, like a mile down, if things break down there, it's a disaster. So you have to have ultra hard, ultra strong materials, and that's what. So they were prepared to pay for that. Yeah.
Really interesting. Heard you on the radio a lot.
Hi.
Honour to meet you. But also, I might do a plug for a thing called the Repair Cafe. It's
Yes.
a movement, so we can get some things repaired.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to say that repair is not worth doing manually, and it's sort of it's a different.
But the economics is the problem.
The economics is the problem, as you know. And if I had a longer talk, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, I'm a big fan of manual repair and repair cafes because I think economically it's going to be very hard to get repair to work in the way that we used to have it. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing, because actually the act of repairing something yourself changes you. And you understand it better, you kind of feel more connected to that product or that object or that piece of clothing or that amazing washing machine, and you look after it better. And really, when we look at the sustainability problem, the biggest move we can do in the next 5 years is everyone just hold on to stuff longer. Like, if you can just keep everything going for twice as long, you'll halve the CO2 emissions associated and halve the pollution. And we need to get better at repair because this stuff that I'm talking about is going to take much, much longer time frames to deliver into real products. So it's not either or, actually, it's both. But also the other thing about repair in a cafe like that is that it's a place to connect with each other. And more, we don't have these community spaces where we have something that we can all gain from it. And I've met loads of people, and you have them too, I'm sure, where you've got your favorite food processor, right, which you've had, and your parents gave it to you, right? And you don't want it ever to die. Like, it's really important to you. Your mum made cake mix in there. Now you're making cake mix in there. And now it dies one day, and you phone up the manufacturer and they say, that model, no, and there are no parts. No one will help you. Buy a new one is what they'll say to you. I don't want a new one, I want that one. Because it really means something to me. It's like an heirloom. And then you go to a repair cafe, you'll find lots of people like, sorry, what's your name? Andy, yeah. And they will help you repair it. And that is really important, I think. So, yeah.
And they give cake.
And you get, yeah, as long as you make it in the cake, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I think this will be our last question for the session.
Hi. I come from an area where we used to repair things as well, by the way. The material looks really good. Where do you mine it from? Where does it usually exist? In what part of the world? And what is the environmental impact for mining that material?
Which one? The tungsten ball?
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually not very good environmentally. Like a lot of those very rare elements, then in fact, we're protected to run out of it. In particular, there are not many places in the world where you can get it. It occurs naturally in mineable quantities that are economic to mine. So Russia, China, Canada, but also, the consequences to local communities and local wildlife of mining operations is generally terrible. And so, not to say that you should blame miners for that. I mean, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have any of this stuff, and we would be totally different people. But now that we know that and we're aware of it, we need to kind of really ramp down mining and hold on to the material better. And so, in that case, like if you can keep an object going for longer in its current shape. So, thinking of the thing about tungsten is that it's used as tools, so it does actually deteriorate in that form. And also it kind of disappears into the environment because you get small amounts of it just essentially via heat just kind of disintegrate. If you remember, tungsten first came into our lives as a material in light bulbs. So it was the material, the filament for light bulbs, not so long ago, like 20 years ago. And Yeah, but we just used to throw them in the bin. I don't even remember this. We was just to throw them in the bin, in fact. But we should have been collecting them and recycling that tungsten. So it's a really good example, that material, of our carelessness. Like, we made this amazing thing, like a light bulb, with a very, very fine filament, which is a double helix inside. And then we used to all just throw them in the bin. So yeah, I think it's just a good example of an amazing material. We should hold on to all of them more for longer.